have your own hot breath water.
Hot breath water. This is great.
This is it.
Hot breath. That's cool that you have that. Everything's branded like that. That's great.
You got branding, you know?
Yeah, you bet.
So, had you heard of the show before?
No, I had not.
Wow, okay.
So when I saw it, I was like, oh, cool. This is great.
Yeah, it's all comedy mastery. So I know we have a lot of like parallels, so I didn't know if it had entered your sphere yet.
Well, it doesn't. It hasn't yet, but it's good to see it because, I think synergy is so much more effective than comedian.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
Of course.
comedians are always so insecure. They're like, I'm not telling anybody anything. These are my secrets.
Yeah.
So
you still got to do the work.
Yeah.
I've interviewed almost 200 comics, and some have been more hesitant than others about like, well, I don't want to give away the sauce. I'm like, they still have to cook it. Like,
right.
And you can give them the recipe, but it's going to turn out different because it's a different chef.
Absolutely right.
So I've never really gotten that aspect of like, well, I don't want to give away too much. And most people have been cool, or I've coerced them into revealing it once they're like, oh yeah, they still have to live on stage for 20 years and then figure it out. So let me give you your proper introduction here.
Okay.
All right. Hot Breathiverse, welcome back to the Hot Breath Podcast. This is your weekly guide to comedy mastery. I am your host, comedian Joel Byars. And our guest today, hot brethren and sisterin, this is the man with the plan when it comes to comedy. All right? This guy is a 25-year comedy veteran who has written from everyone from Jay Leno to Chris Rock to Bill Hicks. Up until he got custody of his oldest son, he was on the road grinding at comedy 40-plus weeks a year. He has now since become, in my opinion, the authority on comedy education and really creating platforms and resources for comedians to learn the tools they need to become successful comedians. So he is the perfect guest to have on here. He just recently started his own podcast, like the Standup Comedy Clinic.
It's not launched yet.
Okay.
We're just like you had recommended at the seminar.
Yeah.
Backlog like 10, 14 episodes before you put it up. Right?
Okay, perfect. So definitely this is one you're going to want to listen to multiple times and share with other comedians. A lot of people out there are attempting to teach this craft, but from my research, he has the best platform. I mean, if you go on his YouTube, he has more hits than anyone else. If you go on his website, he has more resources. So if you're looking to learn about comedy, this podcast is the tool for you. And now our guest, you now know, is the tool for you. So without further ado, welcome to Hot Breath, Jerry Corley, everyone. Jerry Corley.
Thanks. Well, I'm glad you did that research because I didn't know that I had more hits. So
on
good.
YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh, your YouTube page is killing it.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, it just started. I started one time putting out one video, and the video was 47 minutes long.
Okay.
And it was basically, it was called How to Write 15 Jokes in 30 Minutes. And it was based on a headline, Tiger Woods falls out of the world's top 20. And then I just basically showed the process of writing the jokes. Oh. And so it took 40 minutes, no editing, it was just there. And I didn't know much about YouTube, just put it up. And now it's got, it's got like 300,000 or over 300,000 views.
How long ago was that?
That was 7 years ago.
7 years ago was your first video.
Yeah, first video I put out.
Yeah, and now if you even just search comedy, like you're like the first hit that comes up.
Well, that's cool.
Anything about how to write a joke or how to stand on stage, how to become a comedian, you're like the top resource.
Good to know. Yeah.
Is there a rivalry within? Because there's some there's some like players and names we know like Greg Dean and Judy Carter. Is there a rivalry between?
I think that for me, no. I don't feel a rivalry. I don't think anybody's my competition, and not to say I'm above anybody else. I think you learn. You don't become a doctor from just going to one professor, And so I have books that line my bookshelves. Almost any book that was written about comedy, I have it on my bookshelf. It's not like I focused on one dude and said he's the only one. That'd be ridiculous. But it's like even Melvin Helitzer's book, Comedy Writing Secrets, is the absolute foundation of what I started. That was based on Gene Parrott's Comedy Writing Step by step.
Okay.
So, but it was more written as a sort of a journalist's point of view, a more layperson's point of view. If you get Gene Parrott's book, he kind of drills down and almost makes it tedious, where you start getting, sometimes, there's too much work, whereas Melvin in Comedy Writing Secrets made it really kind of easy to get into it. And so I found some sort of balance that worked more as a comedian, right? So what I saw that Melvin Helitzer was doing as a journalism professor teaching comedy writing at Ohio University, and what Gene Parrott was doing as Bob Hope's head writer, I was like, well, I'm a comedian. I'm taking this stuff, taking it on the road, trying it in front of audiences. Then I would have some theories, go out, try it in front of an audience, then write down all my notes.
Oh, okay.
And so I sort of used the road as my lab, And it was just, that's how, and then I realized it was helping other students how good that felt to see them go up there and make a change to a joke and it got a real crisp laugh and you go, yeah. And I was like, that's a good feeling. So then Booker started putting new guys on the road with me to help them get better. And so I said, this is a lot of fun. And then when I was given the custody by my oldest son, and I was like, and the road work just stopped. Like, that pattern disrupt you hear in a commercial? You hear that, dun, 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 dun. They build the pace, and you have to get up and get the kids ready for school. You got to get them to their breakfast, get them, make sure they're dressed, make sure they have enough mittens, and then diarrhea. That sort of record scratch sort of thing. Well, we hear that all the time in commercials. We hear that pattern disruption used all the time, and so that was my career. It was like things were moving forward. My manager was calling saying, hey, we're booking bigger rooms. We're, next thing you know, we're gonna start doing arenas. Things are really going well. I've got these things lined up for you. And then the judge says, you have your son full custody. Yeah. And it was like, diarrhea. And
in a good way, right?
That was my career, yeah. But he was not doing well in school. And he said to me, I wanna live with you. Mom stresses me out. And so I talked to the mom. Mom was like, I said, Keith wants to live with me. She's like, over my dead body. I said, it doesn't need to be that exciting. And so she resisted, and I said, well, we'll go to court then. And the judge made a pretty much instant decision. Just spoke to my son, and then said, we're done here.
And you even said you canceled 20 weeks of work, didn't you?
28 weeks of work I had to cancel. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I remember those phone calls, and as I finished, got through the whole list of people I was booked with, I was like, okay, now what? And I had a writer's forum at the Friars Club in Beverly Hills. It was just me and, first, 30 guys would get together on Monday nights. We'd eat dinner and then have some drinks and hang out. And I said, we got this cigar room over there that nobody uses. Why don't we go in there and write some jokes? And I got these weird looks, and one guy said, I've had the same act for 25 years. I was like, why? Why would you do that? It's so much fun to write a new joke. So we started the writer forum. It was just me and 3 comics. And then over a period, by 6 months, it was me and 27 of the comics. They were in the room, and they kept looking to me. I was just doing it as sort of a group collaboration thing. But they were saying, you fix jokes. You know how to fix the jokes. You seem to know what's missing. How do you do that? You're the joke doctor. And they started, every time I'd walk in, they'd go, hey, the joke doctor's here. And that kind of is how I got the name The Joke Doctor,
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And you also
I make the jokes well.
Fixing the jokes is how you create tags for Bill Hicks and Chris Rock, right? You were the Comedy Store, just watching them, and they're like, hey, have you thought of this?
Right. That way, and also, when I was doing my writing, in the mornings, doing my current events writing, one of the best lessons I got was from Gene Parrott: never edit yourself in the first draft. And so one of the jokes would be deemed racist if I did it, but if Chris Rock did it, it wouldn't be. And the joke it contained the N-word. So I'm going to say it without saying the N-word, because we know what happens when you say things, right, Shane Gillis?
Yeah, right.
So we don't want to, and if anybody really listened to the context of what he said in that podcast, he wasn't saying it himself. He said, the people said, let's put them there.
Oh, yeah, but it's...
And I was like, forget it, you're done.
Buzzwords, headlines.
The first Asian superhero now on Marvel, Simu Liu, who's going to be the first Asian superhero. I think it's awesome. The guy is awesome as an actor and athlete. He's got a great sense of humor. But he The way he heard it, he tweeted about it and tweeted at SNL and at NBC. Of course, you've got Marvel, this big film launching, this movement of millennials who love Marvel. And then they're like, well, we have a choice. I think the optics don't look good here because we're also hiring the first Asian not ready for primetime player, which made me say, really, in 45 years, who's the racist SNL? Right?
Yeah. Jim Jeffries brought up a good point he brought up a character, I think it may have been Mike Myers that played it back in the day, but it was just him like being exaggerating racial. I can't remember what race he was playing, but he pointed out like 3 examples of SNL characters who were blatantly racist. But in this time, and I'm sure you've seen in how long you've been doing comedy, like you probably wouldn't even pitch this Chris Rock joke anymore to him because maybe
I would pitch it right to him, but it would be in private, like I did before. I pulled him aside.
Yeah.
So the joke was, this is how old the joke is. This is this is when you had those 2 Ethiopian guys who were taken into custody by the NYPD, and one was sexually abused with a plunger. I don't know, you don't remember this, but there was a big story in the 90s. And so NYPD had this racism issue. And I said, basically, Mayor Rudy Giuliani issued a memo to the NYPD telling them they need to be more polite. So now when they pull you over, they say, step out of the car, Mr. N-word.
Ah, okay.
Right? And I know I could never do that joke. I hate that word. I grew up in just this tremendously wonderful family, musical theater parents. We had everybody over, and it was like,
your dad was like a famous character actor.
Right, famous character actor.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I didn't really know there was an issue with different colors of skin until I was much older, until I was like 10 or 11. But as a kid growing up, everybody was over at the house. So. So when I wrote that joke, I said, I could never do that joke. But Chris Rock could do it because he's working on a piece right now dealing with this very subject. And I was down at the Comedy Store, and I bumped into him. He didn't even know me. I said, hey, man, you don't know me, but I wrote a joke today that would fit in perfectly with the segment you're doing on the NYPD. He goes, lay it on me. And I told him, and I said, it's not my voice. So, and I laid it on him. He goes, now I see why it's not your voice.
Yeah. Did you say the word to him?
I said, he goes, and he did the joke in the main room. It got an applause break. And he says, you write more like that, I'll pay you for them. I go, fuck that. You're paying me for that one. I saw the response. And he took out $50 and gave it to me.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like, that's how it started, this sort of just write stuff. But I'd listen to Bill. Bill Hicks approached me one time when I did a segment in my act, and he asked me if he could have it. He said, because it would fit perfectly in a piece I'm doing. And I said, but I respect what you're doing. I don't want to step on your toes. And I go, well, that's not even the funny part. I was a kid, and he did it and got a big applause break on HBO. And I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah, there's like the forgive me joke, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like they're like, you will be oppressed or whatever.
Right.
It was like he did this whole religion rant, and then he's like, well, then forgive me. It's like a famous joke.
Exactly what when we were traveling cross country, my dad, met his mother for the first time, and I was a little 12-year-old punk, and she said, Jerry, you're going to have hell to pay. And I say, what's hell cost these days, Grandma? Hey, give me $3.79 and an eternal flame. And she smacked me. And then my dad actually took her by the wrist and said, you will never strike my kid's mother. And she goes, how am I going to accept this, Pat, if you can't accept Jesus into your heart? And he says, well, you forgive me. You've never understood this. You forgive me. And I did that as a piece, and then that's when Bill Hicks approached me. And I was like, I didn't even know who he was at the time.
Oh, it was that long?
Yeah.
He was just like a working comic?
He was coming up. He was just coming up. It was his first HBO thing when he did that piece.
What was that like, being at like the Comedy Store and being around like these are like the 1% comedians,
Yeah. I was just starting, so I didn't really, I wasn't commiserating or hanging out with any of the guys, but it was just these random, I would bump into people and just randomly meet them, and the next thing you know, I just started to sort of hand off jokes,
You became like, you were almost like the joke plug. You could write jokes for people and you were starting to make money that way?
Right, and making a little money, and then when I'd see open micers, I would just give them jokes. You know, I'd listen to their bits and just write tags and toppers in my little notebook, tear it off and say, hey man, that piece you do about the Hummer, maybe these would be good tags. And they go, wow, that's really funny. I go, you could have it if you want it. They go, I can just have it? Sure, you know, jokes are a dime a dozen.
But even the Jay Leno job came about, you got him on the phone somehow, and then just pitch him a joke in the moment, and then boom,
and I can't talk about it in depth because I did once, and it got out there, and I got a call because when I was fired, I signed an NDA. And so there's a lot of specifics I can't talk about. There was politics involved, and so I'm not, you know. Okay. It's like with my movie that I wrote, it was like, there are certain things I'm not allowed to say because you sign these things that say, you know, anything could be looked at as you disparaging somebody these days. So, you know, but it's so weird. Well, I mean, part of me goes, I can talk about it. Yeah, I got fired because they were working on pushing me out because it was, well, I can't really talk about it because it was a personality thing in that somebody felt threatened because I was writing a lot of jokes. Because the guys who trained me, Gene Parrott and Bob Mills, Robert Mills was Gene Parrott's contemporary. Oh my gosh. And Robert Mills was an attorney in San Francisco, and he basically responded to a writing lesson, joke writing lesson from Gene Parrott thing, correspondence course. And then he said, hey, you're not sending me any more courses. He said, you're the first person that has gone through all of them. So he brought him down to L.A. and got him a job writing at Dean Martin Roasts. And then he got a job writing for Bob Hope. And he's the one that said, I would write for Dean Martin from 9 to 5, and then I'd go home, have dinner with my wife, and write 100 Bob Hope jokes from 7 to 10. Jeez. And that opened up my brain. Wait a second, you can do that? You can write 100 jokes in a day or in 3 hours? So I wound up hiring them as mentors and coaches, and they would just weekly push me and push me and push me. And so when I started my website, that's when some of these older writers contacted me by email and said, please keep doing what you're doing because the kids coming in these days have no structure.
Yes.
So that was why I was like, oh, okay, so I'm on the right path.
Yeah, and you're speaking of mentors. You also had like George Carlin became a mentor.
Yeah, what a surprising. This was like, you go back and look at the stuff, and it's like, I go back and say, wow, the universe was just sending me all these gifts.
That's amazing.
And until I went back and just thought about all these things, I go, holy cow. I remember this lady who was, she's kind of one of those spiritual psychic ladies, and she said, do you realize all the gifts that were being passed to you by the universe? I go, what do you mean by that? You know? And she sort of mapped them out for me. I go, holy shit, she's right. So what happened, I was doing my first corporate in New York City for Chemical Bank. And my dad's agent actually booked it. He heard somebody wanted something. He said, hey, you want to do this gig? I said, yeah, it's $3,000. So I said, I'll go do it.
$3,000? Yeah, that was like 2 years into comedy, right?
Exactly, right? And, because he knew I had an hour of clean material. And he's like, go do this thing for this bank. And so I go out to New York, and I get up the next morning, and I'm heading, I get up after the gig, and I go down to the little pad there where the cars come in to take me to the airport, and I'm sitting there and, waiting for my car, and it's not showing up, and there's no cell phones. I couldn't just pick up a phone and call. I couldn't call an Uber. And this guy goes, hey, you going to the airport? And I turn around and I go, oh, that guy looks a lot like Carlin, man. And so he says, I said, yeah. He says, you want to ride with me, JFK? I said, if it's not an imposition. He says, sure, you look like a nice guy. I get in the car, and he says, hi, my name's George. And I'm like, gulp? My name's Jerry Corley. He goes, you any relation to the character actor Pat Corley? I said, well, that's my father. And he goes, well, my agent said I should study him to become a better character actor. And I said, who's your agent? He told me his agent. I go, that's my dad's agent. So we just started talking.
Jeez.
And then he said, what do you do? I said, I paint houses. I couldn't tell Carlin I was a comedian.
Oh,
Are
you didn't even
kidding me?
mention it.
Well, it
Whoa.
came out in the conversation
Yeah.
eventually because we're talking, and I go, I memorized your albums, man. And
Mm-hmm.
I started doing like tracks from his albums. I'm like, Wonderful Wino in Western Walla Walla. I was doing this stuff, and he's like, how old were you? I said, 8 years old. He goes, you listened to my albums when you were 8 years old? He goes, yes. And what about the language? I said, my dad and mom both agreed that there's no bad words. There's just inappropriate places to use certain words. Because they're literature people and, musical theater people and Broadway people. So in that literature, there's, profanity. So if you looked at it as bad words, then you would address them differently. And we didn't use them much when we were kids. I would just use them when I was reciting Carlin albums. And they said, if you have any questions about the language, ask us. And so I asked a lot of questions as a kid.
And then how did the relationship grow with George? And what was he like?
Well, he said anytime, because when we got towards I see the sign that said departures, and I said, this is going to end really soon. And so I said, what would be your best piece of advice? I may never see you again. He goes, I hope not, But he meant, I hope so, right?
Yeah.
I hope you won't. I hope not. You won't see me again. Well, whatever, right? So he said, I said, what would be your best piece of advice? He said, there's a line, cross it. That sounds like a metaphor, George. Give me something that's more concrete. You mean, I don't want did he mean touchdown or line crossing, or what does he mean exactly? He said, you ever read the newspaper, watch the news, and call bullshit? And I said, all the time. He said, make that your comedy, but make it funny. Here's a trick, raise the bridge. And that means raise your eyebrows when you're delivering something that you're angry about. And it'll change it from you being angry and judging maybe this audience's ideals to, this is absurd. I don't understand it. I'm confused.
Interesting.
Jon Stewart uses it all the time, or use it all the time on The Daily Show. He'd go, this is crazy. Why are they doing this?
I find I have a habit of doing this. So it's just raise your eyebrows instead and you perceive differently.
Yeah, watch who Bill Maher struggles with doing that. He tries to. He's like, he often gets into a weird twitch. Yeah, so.
Did you see George again?
Yeah, the next, 2 months later, I was in Vegas, and he was playing at the Celebrity Room at Bally's, and I called the hotel there, and I said, George Carlin's room, please, and they put me through. I left a voicemail, figuring, he's busy, I won't hear back. I go out, I come back to my room at 5 p.m., and there's a message. It's George Carlin. He says, hey, great to hear from you. Why don't you come by, see the show? I've left some tickets. We'll call, and then come back to afterwards, and please come by and say hello. Wow. So I grew up in the theater. That's what theater people say, right? Mm-hmm. So I got the ticket, and I afterwards I went back to the stage manager and said, George said to come by and say hello. And he said, are you Jerry? I said, yep. And so I went back there, and we wound up talking for about 2 hours. And I kept saying, "Am I keeping him here? I don't want to impose." Mm-hmm. And we just talked. He gave me a glass of wine. We just sat and chatted, and it was just a great time. And then we started talking about comedy, and some places I would question and have a counter proposal. Mm-hmm. And he was like, "Great," and he says. And he said, and that's when he said to me, I know with 98% odds that a joke is funny before I step on stage. And I said, how do you know that? Yeah. And he said, because it contains all the elements necessary for a joke to be funny. I said, what are those elements? He said, you're going to have to learn those on your own, kid.
Really?
And then later on, after another glass of wine and a pain pill, because that was George's drug of choice at the time, he said, I think the reason I said that was because instinctively I know what they are, but I can't verbalize them. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can do it, and then come up with some way so you can explain it to the world. And I said, I took that as an order. So
of course, if he says that.
That's when I really got into studying. Why do we laugh?
Yeah, and you're almost like a historian. Like you take back your references to like Socrates, and,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
and you go all the way back to like the source code of laughter. And you.
Well, I wanted, as a 5-year-old kid, I always took apart my toys to figure out how they worked, right?
Oh, okay.
So I figured with comedy, I wanted to do the same thing. I really wanted, why am I doing this? I wanted to at least feel like I'm empowered to work on, approach a joke with confidence, right? Rather than, oh, what do I do? Let me just pray and hope it's going to be funny. So now I can write a joke and know with high odds that it's going to be funny, and I'll even point out why. Well, because it's got this, it's got incongruity, it's got surprise, it's got this is plausible, and I can put those pieces together and get up there with high confidence and deliver a joke. Yeah,
because George Carlin actually had an office that he reported to, as anyone else with a job would do, and that's I'm glad you brought up older writers encouraging you to take this approach of technique and all these different elements of comedy, because a lot of, especially now, I mean, I don't know if this is a newer thing or you've always noticed it, but it seems like a lot of comedians are trying to just get by with like attitude and just being like, yeah, this is funny because I'm saying it cool. But really, there's gotta be a punchline.
Exactly. In fact, we can go back and talk briefly about that. So the Leno thing, what happened was something happened and Leno called me because I sent a letter. My dad said, send a letter. And so I sent a letter. And then...
to the Tonight Show?
Yeah, to the Tonight Show.
Because you were feeling...
Well, I felt their joke was stolen,
Oh.
Verbatim. It wasn't even... It was an evergreen joke, and it wasn't even a version of it. It was verbatim. And I know who did it, and I know who was at the show that night. And then 24 hours later, it's on the Tonight Show verbatim. And I go, okay, that's not cool. Oh. So I told my dad about it. He goes, write a letter. I go, no, I'm not going to write a letter, Dad. Nobody writes letters. It's stupid. So I wrote a letter.
Right.
And then 2 months later, I got a call from Jay. And as I'm answering the phone, I hear this voice. I'm like, what one of my friends does a really great Jay?
Of course.
And then I realized it was him. And I just said to him, I said, Jay, I've got you on the phone. My job is not to get off this phone until I have a job writing for you.
And then that's when you...
And he goes, all right. Well, I can't do your act. I go, well, you did. He goes, touche. And then... And then he said, you got to be up at the current events. And then he said, like this morning, Oahu, Hawaii lost power to the entire island. What would you do on a joke like this? Now, I'm sitting there going, oh, my God, another gift. Because I was watching the news that morning, and I see him now in his office watching CNN, and the Chiron says exactly what it said at 7 a.m. when I was writing. Oahu, Hawaii lost power to the entire island. Traffic lights were out, court buildings were shut down, and about 100,000 kids stayed home from school today. And that's a three-way buildup. All I have to do is remove the third, and now I have two. Now I have to disrupt the pattern, and but still, so it's infrastructure, court buildings, traffic lights, and then show something else that's heightened in reality, but still deals with losing electricity. So I said, and a vacationing Don King was seen with flat hair. So, and that's when Leno goes, and I said that right on the phone in that moment. He goes, you just thought of that? I go, yeah, I just thought of it. Of course, I had been writing it earlier. A lot of comics back then said, well, that was luck. I said, that was luck? I said, no, well, luck is opportunity meets preparedness. And because I was writing every day, because Gene Parrott said, treat yourself like a professional now, and that means write every day and set it up in your schedule. Write every single day. And I read that Jerry Seinfeld was writing 5 hours a day. So I said, I'm going to write 5 hours a day. And so and he'd have the calendar with the red X's on every day he writes, and don't break the chain.
Break the chain, exactly.
So I had that calendar up there. I was doing all of that. So, and that's what happened. I mean...
So then he was like, okay, you got the job?
That's
on
it.
the phone.
He said, he started me as a contributing writer. So they sent release forms that day. I signed them, sent them back, and that night I wrote 100 Zachary Taylor jokes. Because it was a big deal. Zachary Taylor, I think, 17th, 18th president of the United States, his body was being exhumed, and they were trying to determine whether or not he was poisoned. And so that was a big deal. And so I wrote a bunch of jokes on that and then faxed them over. Now, what I loved about it was the fax, they still had that thermal paper, that slow.
Oh, yeah.
And I sent 100 jokes on several pages. So that they thought the fax machine was broken. And they got out of all the jokes I submitted, they used one that day, and it was the more mundane of all the jokes I wrote. I thought, that's not even that's like a transition joke. Why would you use that? But it taught me a lesson. On the Tonight Show, they look for middle of the road because you're trying to respond to middle America, not the coasts.
Gotcha.
So The joke was something like, Zachary Taylor, 19th President of the United States, his body was being exhumed. CNN apologized for not being able to give us pictures of the crypt, because there's a centerfold you wouldn't want to miss. Silly joke.
I love you do it in his voice, though, too.
I used to, every time I would do a joke, I would deliver it in his voice, just to see if it fit. Did it fit? Does it fit? Does it fit? And so I would do this, do those impressions of him.
And you did that for like 8 years? You wrote for him?
Yeah.
After that?
Yeah.
Wow. So that's crazy. It started out with, I guess you were at a stand-up show, and then like the next day you're like, oh, I did that joke at a show, and then now it's on the Tonight Show. Let me write a letter. Now I have a job at the Tonight Show.
Right, exactly. So that's it wasn't even that I just wanted to do stand-up, but I wanted to really be a good writer. And the best way to do that is to practice. The best way to practice is current events jokes.
Yeah.
Because current events jokes, you see them you just take headlines and lines in the news and then take a straight line and try to make it funny. Rather, a lot of people make the mistake of going to the weird news, trying to find the weird news that's already funny, and you have nothing to do. You just state what's weird, right? So instead, just taking a straight line and then making it funny. That's the difficult part.
So I definitely want to roll our sleeves up on the actual work of comedy as well. Like I want to make sure we get a lot of just the context of your career and just how qualified you are to be the authority you are on comedy. But your approach to the work of comedy is inspiring. And like you're talking about, I'll just write for 5 hours a day because Seinfeld said. But I mean, I've gone through phases where I'm like, I'm writing every day and this is great. And then it's like you miss one day, and then one day turns into a week, and then a week turns into a month, and then it's a year. And you're like, wait, where'd my writing habit go? Like,
exactly.
What kind of tips do you have for comedians to start that daily ritual we all know we should do, and we all feel better when we write, but there seems to be a block with us just staying consistent, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's with everybody and everything. Like if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger or The Rock, he's in the gym every day. That's what he does. It's like his religion. It's non-negotiable. And when I decided I was going to write, it was going to be non-negotiable. I had to get every day. I had to be in that seat. And it was like, I know comedians who have a day job who adhere more to the schedule of that day job that they hate than they do to their writing schedule because they impose it upon themselves. And I think there's a couple of blocks there. One is a lot of comedians get into equate comedy with frivolity, and therefore they treat their careers frivolously. And so it's like, well, I kind of got into this to beat the system, so why would I adhere to a system if I don't want to be in a system? And comedy's serious business, man. When you're making your minimum pay is $4,000 a week writing on a late show, then you better work your butt off if you want that job. It's harder than you think. But so if I get up every day, and then my day is basically I make my coffee, I sit down with my laptop, open it up at the kitchen table, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to look for 10. I'm going to start with 3 headline jokes, and then I'll just take 3 headlines, and with those 3 headline jokes, I'll usually write, say, 15 jokes per headline, and that gets me started.
Okay.
And so then and that'll be. Then I'll be like an hour and a half in or something like that, and then I'll write some more. And I might get inspired to go off on a different place. Sometimes I sit down and I go, okay, today I assign myself, like on a certain day, so I'll assign myself, today's cliche reformations. So I'm just going to grab 10 random cliches that everybody's familiar with. And that can include book titles, movie titles, slogans for corporations. I'll just write those down and say, okay, I'm going to write some takeoffs and some reformations. So a reformation is taking the first part of the cliche and then coming up with a second ending, right? So it's like W.C. Fields. If at first you don't succeed, our brains are running, try again. And all he says is quit. There's no use killing yourself over it. So finding a cliche and finding a second ending. So then I'll do a few of those. And that'll if I do one, also I'm inspired. Because there's some days you wake up, you don't feel like it.
Exactly.
And so if I do 1 or 2 of those, I'll be like, wow, I'm feeling like it now. I feel inspired because I came up with one joke. One joke can change your whole viewpoint of how you feel about writing today.
You just have to show up every day. You just force yourself. And you're talking about a 5-hour habit, but would you start off like, okay, I'm just going to sit down and write one joke every day, and then it like grows into, I wrote one. Now I feel like writing 5 more. Like you just kind of
it
small
started
goals type deal.
In fact, that's what Gene Parrott said to me. Sit down, write one joke a day. Next week, change it to 3 jokes a day. Next week, double it, go to 6 jokes a day. Because if you could write 3, you could write 6. It was tough when I started hitting 18, then 30, and I was like, I'm tapped. He goes, push yourself. And I got past 30 to 60, and then all of a sudden it just grew. And every threshold I hit and passed it, I knew if I could pass that one, I could pass this one. And so it sort of became like trying to be an athlete towards your writing. You know, I'm going to push myself further. And if you're not sitting down every day, pushing yourself to get better, you're not improving. We see comics do this all the time. They plateau and they sort of stay the same with no reinventing or no new discoveries. As comics, they're just the same, you know? So it's like, how do they expect to get better if they're not doing anything to improve? Are you improving the amount of mics you're doing per week? Are you improving the amount of jokes you're writing? Are you trying to come up with fresh stuff? Are you replacing the mundane jokes that get mediocre laughs with laughs that get, you know, real punches and applause breaks? If you're not effectively doing that, you're not really doing anything to get better. It's pushing yourself past your comfort zone. So that's kind of what I try to do.
How would you overcome writer's block?
Oh, there's lots of cool things to overcome writer's block. First of all, there's like cliche reformations. Those are fun, right? Wordplay. Just taking 15 random words, and you can go to a website that has a random word generator, right? You just Google random word generator, and I'd write 15 random words and come up with alternate meanings for those words. Just that process sometimes, it's not even thinking about being funny. It's just, here's an alternate meaning, and all of a sudden an idea comes to you. Oh, crap, I can use this for this. You know, say the word peace, you know. Well, peace, would you like a piece? Well, would you like a piece of what? You know, and all of a sudden now there's a potential for, most comedians think cynically or sexually, so peace could be piece of ass. So if my wife says, cutting some cake, and she says, Jerry, would you like a piece? I said, yeah, then I'll take some cake. You know, and now I didn't realize that before, and it becomes like something called frequency illusion. You know, when you buy a car and then suddenly you see that car everywhere, you thought the car was unique. Everybody has this car, right? But it's like now you understand that you can take a meaning of a word and come up with alternate plays on it, because you now know that's possible. Now and you start to practice it in your regular interaction with your comedy buddy, your sister, your brother, your mother, your wife, your husband. You now are training your brain to recognize that opportunity.
Yeah, I guess as comedians we're like, I gotta write down and write my genius bit today. But it's almost like if you have writer's block, take a step back from your material, just write something silly. Just
write
play
something
around.
Silly, simple. Some of the best jokes are the simplest. Anthony Jeselnick. Everybody loves. Most comedians, let me just say, most comedians love Jeselnick. Oh, he's a genius. Look at the structure of his material. Very simple. Set up an assumption, shatter the assumption. But he does it with his character, his persona, his through line. He's dripping with this sarcasm and mischievousness that it's almost like he's pranking the world. And it's like he's just this little shrewd, sly guy. He's like, I'm going to play a trick. Watch this, you know? And that's what makes it fun, you know? So, you know, one of my favorite jokes is like, he says, you know, these kids were playing hide and seek in my neighborhood, and one kid they found 3 days later in a refrigerator. And everybody's like, this heaviness, you feel that heaviness. And he's like, yeah, but who else could say they died a winner? And I'm like, it's such a positive note. How could you not be on the side of that joke? Right? Unless you're the parent, I guess. Right?
Yeah, and that's a specific style, you know. And one of my favorite comics, it was like Rodney Dangerfield, Mitch Hedberg. And when I actually started, I was one-liner. I was like a one-liner comic, which I think is a great place for comics to start, just to understand the mechanism of building an assumption and then breaking it. And Ian Edwards was on here, and he broke down a one-liner and then how to expand that into like an actual like 5-minute bit from just one line.
Should I get rid of this and use this?
Oh, you can have whatever you want.
Don't want to have the brands on.
And the book I got, it was actually a Greg Dean's book.
Yeah.
So that was
Greg was
what
my
broke
first
down.
teacher.
Oh, so you took classes from
Yeah.
Greg?
Greg was my first teacher.
Snap.
Yeah. He was the one that taught the setup and assumption, shatter the assumption.
Exactly. Yeah, that was
And
the
I
whole
was
book.
like, that is wow, and that opened up my eyes to a lot of stuff. And then as I wound up sort of being an assistant in his class, so I would record his classes and sort of trade that for tuition. But I was in his classes for a while.
Oh.
And then I felt I learned as much as I could.
And then he sued you.
And then he threatened to sue me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He threatened to sue you.
He threatened to sue me. He said when I was starting to put up my blog and put up my YouTube videos, he called me and he said, I'm going to sue you. I go, for what, Greg? He says, you're basically copying my book. I said, you show me anywhere where I plagiarized anything you have put in your book. I'll share it with my attorney, and then if she thinks it's anywhere close to being plagiarism, we'll take it down. And he stopped bothering me, but he was like, two dissimilar ideas converging, that's mine. I go, you know who initially came up with that? Aristotle. And he's like, what? And I said, and then James Beatty in 1476, he was a philosopher, coined that as well as being a definition of a joke. And I said, have you done your research? And he's like, so for you to say you own it, it's like you saying you own this is like Ford saying they own the internal combustion engine. It's like if Microsoft owes IBM $1 bazillion because they're the ones that came up with the initial computer, right? So it's you can't. And then when Microsoft came up with icons, clickable icons to execute programs, Apple sued them and said that's ours.
Oh, wow.
And a judge determined you can't really patent a concept like that. You can't say, hey, because we use little icons to show to support letters that's a patent. You can't patent that.
See, it's all cool now, I guess.
Well, I try to make it cool, right? I try to, every time I do a seminar, I always mention him, that he was my first teacher, right? Because I try to promote synergy, because again, somebody can go to him and maybe get just a different version of something and go, oh, that flips the switch, because it's not about me. It's about somebody learning this amazing craft, right? So if because they heard something from him differently and all of a sudden it opened up their world, that's a win. It doesn't hurt me. It makes them better. So if I was part of that journey, that's a positive, right? So anyway, I do sort of that thing. So here's what happened. I'll give you a little Dean story. Yes. Greg does a lot of passive-aggressive, let's call it passive-aggressive behavior. And plus the reason why I stopped studying with Greg was this. We were in a class, and this student was having a hard time. He was trying to talk about his father. Obviously, clearly, by the look on this guy's face, he was having a difficult time talking about his father, and there was some rage there. And he was having a hard time, and Greg kept going, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? And the guy you could see was getting visibly ragey. And I'm like okay, Greg's working beyond his credentials right now. So I tried to diffuse it. Now, Greg had this list of all these emotions, right? And I said, hey, Chuck, what one of these emotions or two of these emotions fits the scenario of the story you're talking about when you're talking about your dad? And he goes, this one and this one. I said, why don't you say those and then execute them, Maybe I shouldn't use the term execute when he's that close to rage, right? So he said, oh yeah, and he said the words, which got a chuckle in class, and then he, did sort of an act out, and he got an applause break in class. And Greg shot me daggers, man. And after the class, he was just raging at me. How dare you usurp my authority? I was like, what? It's not about you, man. It's about this guy. Right? This guy trying to have a breakthrough here. We got a breakthrough. It's a win. But he wouldn't let it go. And so I said, no more. This guy's nuts. So that was it. I didn't go to his classes anymore. And then, what we were talking about,
Greg?
Greg. What was
Greg's
the next
story.
Oh, the Greg story. Then, on a fluke, we were at the World Series of Comedy, and I was teaching a seminar, and Greg was scheduled to teach a seminar. Wow. So I was teaching on Tuesday, and Greg was teaching on Friday. So I teach my seminar. Then afterwards, after a show, Greg was trying to mingle, and he's a little awkward in his mingle. But the student comes up to me, one of my students comes up to me, and evidently he took a class with Greg Dean too. And he goes, "Hey, how are you?" And he goes, remember I was your teacher. He goes, and the guy just literally says, "Well, I study with this guy now." And Greg got all kind of weird, right? And then Jim Barnes had a great set, gets off stage, and Greg Dean comes over to help him, give him some tips and stuff. And he says, "Well, you can come to my classes." He goes, "Well, I study with Jerry Corley." And Greg got all upset. So Friday rolls around, and all these people now start, after Greg Dean's seminar, come up and start talking to me. And I go, "Oh, what's going on?" And they say this. They say, Greg got up there, first of all, just talked about himself for 15 minutes, and then basically said, "You guys know Jerry Corley?" And everybody's like, "Yep." He goes, "I taught him everything he knows." And then, so that's what he said. Now, I thought it was funny, right? So that night, Saturday at the finals, everybody's there, right? All the judges and for the finals, and I get Joe asked me to close the segment so the judges can tabulate the scores. So I go up there to do 10, 15 minutes, and I open with like maybe my fifth joke in. I say I have 5 kids, because normally I say I have 5 kids because I'm only half Mormon. And I say, well, I have 5 kids because evidently Greg Dean also taught me how to fuck. And the place explodes in the back of the room while the comics start laughing, and they just started clapping. And Greg goes, Joe goes, "That wasn't really necessary." I go, "It was absolutely necessary.
Totally necessary.
Absolutely necessary."
And did he say anything to you after that?
Nothing.
That was
Nothing.
probably your last.
But he did reach out to me just recently. He sent me he just sent me a note, and he said, "Hey, I got this on this website. I found that this guy was copying and pasting segments of my book, and I found this from your book." And he said, "You may want to give him a call." And I said, "Well, thanks so much for the heads up, Greg. Okay, maybe you're finding your way to being okay with the fact that nobody's taking anything away from you, And it's like, there's lots of teachers in LA, and I don't worry about any one of them, because my only focus is putting out the best content I can for people to learn. And a lot of other people are learning about how much money can I make.
Yes.
If you put your mind there, just like you mentioned in your podcast about, my focus is not about making money. It's about putting out the best content, putting out the best value for my listeners, and that's where things come back to you. It's a long-term game, not a short-term gain.
Yes.
And if that's what you're in it for, because I love what I do, and I love helping people, and I'm going to continue to do it until I can't do it anymore. Because I enjoy it. I enjoy watching people transform. I enjoy having somebody deliver a bottle of Maker's Mark and say, "Thank you for my career." That's an amazing feeling, So it just feels good,
You almost feel like it's you helping them get that laugh. It almost feels like you got the laugh as well, when you see it.
Right.
Because I dabbled with teaching some, but it came down to, and this all happened like this year, where I was like, I'm going to start my own comedy school and really start to help people teaching comedy. But then I had to take a step back because I was like, I've never been afraid of work, but it's like working in the right direction. And I saw myself, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, this is going to become like my job. And I had to be like, well, why did I start comedy? And I didn't start comedy to teach comedy. I started comedy to be a great comedian. And as soon as I had that realization, and I still help people, and if people ask questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But as soon as I closed the door on building a comedy school, like 3 months later, I'm taping my first comedy special. And then next month, I'm going on like my first solo tour. It's like, as soon as I closed that comedy teaching door, now my career opened up.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Do you find that in your even just life experience that you just have to assess first, why am I doing this? And that can almost become like your guiding light in a sense?
Well, I found out for me, what happened with me was, I think there's definitely some value in that focus, laser beam focus on what you're doing, what your intent is. I think what happened with me was I had this vision of what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, first of all, as a comedian, I wanted to be a triple threat. I wanted to be able to sing, dance, and do comedy. I'm very old school. I studied tap. I used to close my big, like when I did my hour-and-a-half show, I would close with singing the Star Spangled Banner as a character named Fritz the Freedom Ferry, which is a character based on my best friend from New York, who's a New York City firefighter that came out of the closet about 15 years ago. And so I do this whole thing because he's sprinkled throughout the act, and the whole act was just a story, and it wound up, people used to come up and say, "I love your message," and so the message seemed to be tolerance and across races and across sexual preferences and all that, and it just sort of, because that's the way I was raised, my dad raised us with a philosophy of, wouldn't it be great if we could take care of everyone? We can't, but wouldn't it be great? So that's kind of the way we were raised.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the through line of the act, it turns out. And but because of the singing and all, but it was so in my pursuit for comedy, I thought, not only do I want to do stand-up, I also want to be a really good writer. So I can increase my revenue streams. Plus I was acting, so I was doing commercials. And then as I was writing my comedy, I was dabbling in screenwriting. And then, and that's how, in dabbling in screenwriting, I wound up writing the movie Stretch with Joe Carnahan. Actually has a screenplay by credit because that was the deal in getting the film made, which was interesting.
Wow.
Because, but I still say, I've got 6 drafts of the motherfucker. So when I say I wrote it. And then my boy Rob Rose came down to L.A. and wrote versions of it with me too, because he's the fastest, funniest guy I've ever met. And then when we met Joe loved it and basically sat down with us, said, we're going to get this film made, but here's the deal. I have to get screenplay by.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. We'll make your movie if you say it's by me and not you.
Yeah, basically.
Oh my
Now, I had an
gosh.
NDA with that one too, and I'm not supposed to talk about it, but the company I signed the NDA with was dissolved to form another corporate company so that they could fight paying us residuals. So I don't have the NDA now with that one. They don't exist.
So do you have any other NDAs floating around? Sounds
No,
like
well, anytime you do a script with a company, you have to sign documents that say you won't disclose, won't disparage, won't, And I don't talk bad. Joe did great things. We made a movie. And a lot of other filmmakers I talked to said, first time you do something, you're usually going to get fucked. And so when I was talking to a good friend of mine, Dave Connolly, I was complaining about getting fucked. And then he sat me down with another writer who wrote some pretty substantial films and who hadn't had a movie sold in a while. But we had lunch together. He goes, I would love if I was getting fucked right now, So I was like, I guess I want to get fucked.
It's a good problem to have, I guess.
In fact, when we sat down with our meeting with Joe, I brought a brown paper bag, and inside the paper bag was lube and condoms.
Really?
I just said, be gentle.
What?
Yeah, that was it. But we got a film made, and so now that the film got made, other doors have opened. People see you as legit. This one producer from Marvel met me because his wife was in one of my showcases, and he says he basically said, "Hey, yeah, I'm a producer from Marvel. I'm not looking for any scripts." And I said, "I don't need to give you a script. I got my own." And he goes, "Tell me more." And so I told him. He goes, "Stretch." He goes, "I just watched that with Jessica last night. I love that. You did that? Oh, wow. We have to talk."
Cool.
And then he came into another one. He's like, "So, do you have any comedies you're writing? Because I do things on the side. I do under 10 mils. That means I do with production budgets of under 10 million. Now you have a producer asking you for something. So I was like, sure. When I write something marvelous, I'll make sure I get it to you. And then I walk away. I don't stay there and say, oh yeah. I just walk away. I act like I'm my own entity. Without. I'm not begging for a job, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, that you're like, I want to be more than just one thing.
Right.
And in researching you, I heard you say comedians should think like entrepreneurs.
Without a doubt.
Please expand on that.
Well, we don't. We think like broke comics. We think
For
like
sure.
broke artists.
It's a mindset for
and
sure.
when I learned, I tell you what, when I was doing my stand-up, I was also teaching comedy traffic school, which is a group. I recommend this for any comic who really wants to have a captive audience.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you're working as an MC. You have to get a state mandated curriculum out to this group of people while making it humorous. What a great training ground for 8 hours. So I was doing this, and I know it was going well because when we'd have like a Wednesday, Thursday evening class, the second night I had a dude show up with his wife. He goes, I brought my wife. I go, why? It's date night. This is a traffic school, He goes, yeah, but it was so much fun last night. You're cool with it, right? I go, sure, bring her in. And so it was whatever it was. I was obviously getting laughs, and they were still learning the material. And so that for me helped me to branch out to doing warm-up for television shows. Because perfect scenario, same thing, basically. And then what I did was I had this guy in one of my traffic schools who was president of the Chamber of Commerce. And he came up to me and he said, I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce. He was there for rolling a stop sign. And he said, we do an annual dinner. Every chamber in the United States does one of these where they swear out the old officers and swear in the new. I would love you to MC it and do 30 minutes of stand-up. I'll pay you $800 and give you beer. And I was in college at the time. And I thought, broke, and I thought, beer? I'm in. And so I did the event. It went really well. I got a videotape of it. I hired a videographer, right, which was $600 at the time.
Investing in yourself.
And so I made $200 total on the gig and got that video. And then 2 weeks later, the neighboring city's Chamber of Commerce called me and said, hey, I heard you did a great job over at Chico. Would you come and do hours? How much do you charge? Me, I thought the going rate was $800. I didn't know I could negotiate, so I took the gig. And I thought to myself, how many chambers of commerce are there in the United States? 7,650. And I had to go down to the library to get that data because we didn't have the internet back then. And so I basically got a database for 200 of them in the region of Northern California. Sent out flyers via fax with me at the dais at the Chico Chamber of Commerce saying, change your annual dinner to an event. Hire a professional comedian to MC. And I got a bunch of phone calls that came in. I booked 28 in a 3-month period, all at $800. And I said, I've got a career. I've got a business. And so that's how I started going out and doing corporates. I love the catharsis of doing the clubs, but the clubs don't pay like corporates do.
Oh, no.
So then I was able to up my dollar amount for other corporate events. And then I said, what is a Chamber of Commerce? It's an association. How many associations are there in the United States? Too many to count, but according to one of the databases that track associations, there is like 2.3 million. All wanting a comedian to do their event, they just don't know it yet. They don't know how it fits. But with the Chamber of Commerce, since I knew they did annual dinners, and most of the time they can't find the person that really wants to MC it, that's their pain point. And so I offer a solution to the pain point, just like every commercial does, right? Pain point, pain point, pain point, solution. That's how you sell something, right? So and when I was becoming a comedian booking myself, I got a sales kit, how to be a good salesman, because I knew I'm going to have to sell myself. I hate sales, but I might as well learn the techniques.
Entrepreneur.
And that helped me to
Business.
book a lot of stuff, and that helped me to get a manager and agent because I was already working. I went in and show them how much I'm working. They said, yeah, we want to sign you.
It's funny you say Chamber of Commerce because I did a Chamber of Commerce event last year, and you're making me think I need to email every Chamber of Commerce in the region now. Because I did that one.
They need to know, but if they know where it fits, how does it fit? How is it a solution for us? Because if you just say comedy, they're like, okay, what comedy? Where does it fit? But if you find a place where it could fit, like MC for their annual dinner, that fits. What if, and so I said, what can I do? And I read this thing in a business journal that said the California companies, small businesses were facing, $28 million in settlements, legal liability settlements for sexual harassment lawsuits. And so I came up with a 20-minute routine on how to alleviate sexual harassment or how to recognize it and alleviate it. You got to know what it is first before you alleviate it. And I prepared it, a humorous sort of thing, basically a stand-up act with a speech, so information laden with a lot of humor points built in. And then offered a free luncheon to the Rotary Club. And they had me in. I said the caveat is don't tell anybody it's free. And so I delivered this 20-minute thing on tolerance in the workplace and pitched it from the angle of pain point, $28 million in liabilities. How many of your small business owners are prepared for this? I can deliver this thing on alleviating sexual harassment in the workplace by developing tolerance. And so I went up and delivered this thing, 25 minutes. They loved it. 15, 20 people gave me business cards. Hey, we have a Christmas party. We have a golf tournament. We have this. And I booked all these gigs. So they came to me with that,
It sounds like comedians thinking like entrepreneurs means think outside of just the comedy club structure.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Where else can you apply this public speaking skill? I mean, starting your own show is a way.
Yep.
But also finding there's events everywhere. There's birthday parties. There's family reunions. Like think outside of there's the old school where but you got to rise the ranks of the comedy club. But it's like the business of comedy is way beyond just trying to MC feature then headline a comedy club.
So far beyond. In fact, and just a little note, I don't say any of this to brag because money to me is just a result of you doing something positive. It really is. I think if you keep it that way, you never have the ups and downs of success and failure. You have the joy of doing the work for the sake of the work. My dad taught me that as an actor, and I live by it. So in this case, word got out that I was teaching comedy. There was this doctor in lots of my classes. He loved what I did, and he gave the word. He gave the word to the director of Kaiser. Director of Kaiser for West LA called me and said, "Jerry, I'm doing a seminar where I'd like to teach doctors to use humor in the workplace because I want their clinic visits to be more like house calls." Can you help doctors develop a sense of humor in the clinic visit? I said, that's right down my alley. And so we had a couple of phone calls, and he said, how much? I said, $5,000. And he said, no problem. He said, I'm going to run it by the board. First he said, is that all? And I went, psh.
If he's like 5,000, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so he said, oh, that's just for me showing up.
Right, yeah.
I can't change it then. But what happened, they passed on me. So 3 days later, a week later, I get this call from this guy and he called me up. He said, they went with some mucky muck from Cisco or Toxin from Oracle and all these big companies. So, but his name is Dan something or other. So this guy calls me up named Dan saying he needs help on how to use humor. Can I coach him on that? Because he's got a speech for Kaiser where he's talking to 200 doctors in the morning, 200 in the afternoon, and they're paying him $40,000.
40?
$40,000. So I said, I can help you with that. He goes, how much will that cost me? I go, $5,000. Because I wanted to make back the money I lost. So he agreed, and he was miserable as a student. He was arrogant. He refused to adapt things and learn. Jerry, I don't need to self-deprecate. I know I'm very knowledgeable, and I research my stuff, and I'm good at what I do. I said, but you're talking to doctors. They need to know that you don't feel you're superior to them because they're doctors. So if you self-deprecate just a little bit, they'll trust you more. He still refused. I said, you know what, I can't work with you. So just give me half and good luck. 6 months later, I get the call from the director of Kaiser. He said, that guy, he didn't do so well. So he didn't live up to our expectations. Are you still willing to come help us out with this event? Yes, sure. Is your fee still $5,000? I said, no, sir. It's now $40,000. And he said, I'm just curious. Why is it more? I said, well, because you worked with a guy and he didn't do it for you and you paid him $40,000. He goes, how do you know? He called me up for coaching and he was miserable to coach with. He goes, ha ha ha. I can see that. He said, I have no problem with the price. In fact, the board might like it more because that sounds more legit to them. Mm-hmm. And that opened my mind to how we think about money and how other people think about money. Comedians think about money as oh my God, I got a piece of gold, I'm gonna hold on to it forever. Right? Because there's not a lot of it going around.
Yeah.
But these guys think of money in a whole different way. Dropping $40,000 for an afternoon? Wow. And then what they were trying to do is get this to go national as a program for Kaiser. So they were in contact with the director of National Kaiser, who's in Hawaii, and then what happened is he now retired, so it's kind of a dead issue. We'd have to reignite it and get it back going again. But if you can, I had no idea I could ever get paid that much for one event. Never, And when that happened, I went, that's a whole new world.
They
right?
probably passed on you because it was so low.
That's right.
This
exactly.
guy's not legit.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, 40,000.
And it gave me a whole different way of looking at it. We think if we quote too much, they're just going to run away. Mm-hmm. And then, no, they usually counter because they're not as emotional towards money as we are.
Yeah, we're like, $50 and chicken wings? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
How far?
Yeah.
5-hour drive? Yeah,
I'll do it for the
Yeah.
experience and the mic time.
Of course.
And I did a lot of that stuff. Always, I drove for, just to get the mic time somewhere, encounter a new booker, do something for free.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I used my because I had kids. I used my tax refund, which was usually about somewhere around $4,000, and I put that into a travel fund, and I'd use that money to go. I would book one-nighter gigs and fly to the one-nighter gigs, and then in the breaks, I'd map out and do. I'd call up and set up guest spots at the A clubs and sort of use that, be like a salesman on the road, and if I can go there and do a guest spot for free and show them my wares, it's like, hey, here's my vacuums,
Good idea.
So it's basically thinking like an entrepreneur and think about this as your comedy enterprise rather than thinking as a comedian with it gives you a whole different level of commitment to it too. You're not actually sitting there with your hat out. You're sitting there as a business person, saying, we have a mutually beneficial business arrangement rather than, please, I need the gig. It's just they look at you differently when you approach it like that.
And I think it's important comics understand, get funny first. Like have a product to sell. Mm-hmm. Don't try to just jump in and I want to make $5,000. It's like, we'll have a show worth $5,000. Like, get funny first and then start selling.
Yeah, you have to develop that. You have to develop that act. Yes. And like you said, the fundamentals of all comedy is based on the 1- and 2-liner joke. When you can master that, then your stories automatically become funnier. Because what is a story made up of? Sentences. Every sentence is a setup. Gives you an opportunity to now treat that like a 1- and 2-liner, come up with a quick quip or 2 or 3, and then continue with the story. So if you're writing the story, you can go back through your story and go sentence by sentence by sentence. Sid Caesar said a joke is a sentence with a curlicue. What is every story? It's made up of sentences. So if you go up and take each sentence and can tag and top each one with something, or maybe not each one, every third one, and then now you have a bit that's humorous overall, but you have jokes on the way to the big joke. So that's, tags and toppers is the way you get more laughs per minute,
And it's writing the story, not trying to be funny.
Right.
Write it as is, and then go back through and start to.
Yeah, the intent is to
funny.
get let me tell you about the arc of this story, right? So it has the 5 elements of story: setting, theme, plot, character, conflict, and then you have. So you're telling the story, the who, what, where, why, when, and how, the moral arc, and all this stuff. The moral of the story is, and then so you have this great story, and then it goes on forever with no laughs, but you can use technique to drop it in.
Gotcha,
One of the techniques is ask each sentence 3 questions. 1, is there a double entendre play? So is there a word that has an implied meaning I can possibly turn to a comedic meaning in this sentence, just to get a quick quip? I came home from work last night. It's the night before my wife was scheduled for a C-section, so I come home from a gig, and she's laying on the couch watching TV. I said, hey, babe, how you feeling? She says, I'm having some gas pains. I said, well, everyone is. It's like $5 a gallon. And I continue with the story. right? It's just a quick quip on the way to the bigger story. And so I continued to tell the story, but every line gives you something you can play with. Then, if there isn't a double entendre play, you can say, are there two dissimilar ideas converging here? So I can do an incongruity joke with this. If there's nothing, if that's not available, then you could say, is there an assumption in this setup that I can shatter? I'm home, I'm teaching my daughter how to tie her shoes, which is weird because she's 17. And, you just a quick quip on the way to the big joke. So it's adding more stuff. And that's just 3 structures. Then if you add cliche reformations, you force an analogy in there. That's how Bill Burr builds his entire act, is through analogy, likes taking 2 dissimilar ideas and saying they're similar, which sets to the audience an illogical equation. My girlfriend's like a smartphone, huh? Right? They're sitting there with tension now saying, solve that. How is that true? I'm curious. Yeah. And all you do is solve for true. And the secret is, it's got to be true for a smartphone all by itself, or a girlfriend all by itself. Because if you had it, if the verbiage that you come up with as the tie-in doesn't match a person or a girlfriend, then it's not going to work. It sounds forced. It's going to be odd. But if you say, my ex, like I say my ex, it builds more of an antagonistic situation. Like I said, my ex is like a smartphone. At any given time, I can usually find her at least 1 bar. And that's, what a coincidence. That's so true. But that fits for a person or a smartphone. 1 bar being the signal, of course, right? But that's just by listing everything smartphone, right?
So I was going to ask, how do you find the connection between the incongruities?
Yeah, so you basically take, if I decide to use smartphone, say if I want to use, sometimes, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm taking an element and comparing it to my wife, rather than finding traits about my wife and then finding the element to relate it to. Like my ex-wife was an alcoholic, right? So I said, I played on that angle. I said, what else is alcoholic? What else is alcoholic? And funny cars are alcohol fueled. So if I say my ex-wife, she's like a funny car, alcohol fueled. Now I have a quick joke there, but I'm working the other approach to it, the alternate approach, finding what is she like, and then finding something to relate her to. This way I'm taking any element and comparing it to my ex-wife, and then listing everything I can think about, using subcategories of people, places, things, words, phrases, cliches, events. And I'll write that down, people, places, things, words, phrases, cliches, events, every single time I do a list to remind myself. Because when you're so close to it and you're going through the list, sometimes you just get too heady. And I'll go, I didn't do any cliches here. What do people say when they say this? What people are involved in a smartphone? Can you hear me now? That guy, and I'll just write down everything I can about a smartphone. What else in smartphone in the minutia? The signal, what about the signal? The bars. Hey, what are some of the phrases? Hey, my phone's only had 2 bars. Bars, double entendre. That's a bar, could be a drinking establishment. Fits from my ex-wife. Now, because my ex-wife's like a smartphone, At any given time, I can usually find her at least 1 bar. Same phrase fits for a phone. See?
Wow.
That's how and you kidding? Bill Burr uses analogy. That's what he uses through his whole thing. Once in a while, does a cliche drop in, So it's this thing about this girl he was dating being aggressive. She's aggressive, she's like, I want you to choke me. I don't know if I'm comfortable with this, What if I choke too hard? What's the pressure? What's the PSI? What is that? I don't want to choke too hard. Then she's like, I want you to take me against my will. I was like, what is this, 50 Shades of Rape? And he does that joke. Of course, our brains are wired to create expectations since we're children. Very definite expectations.
Yeah.
So think about it. You don't have to rush to a punch because the audience, their brain is already creating an expectation. You don't have to do it. It's so firm. You go like, so if you say in your head 50 Shades of, that was such a popular book and movie that people are already creating the ending. So all you have to do is switch the last word. and it fits the scenario of him being uncomfortable because he's like, force you, it's like, take me against my will. What is it, 50 Shades of Rape? And he gets a quick joke there because he shattered an expectation. And plus it's familiar. And oh my God, so funny how that fits into this place right here and we didn't even see it coming.
Yeah, and
Right?
you're going through like a checklist of all this, and you have like there's like 9 elements.
There are 9 psychological laughter triggers.
Okay.
9 stimuli that the brain respond to that triggers laughter.
Okay.
Surprise, embarrassment, superiority, release, configurational, incongruity, recognition, ambivalence, and coincidence. Did I get all those? That's about 9. Sometimes I forget, right? So then there are 13 major comedy structures. And so the structures pull the triggers.
Okay.
So, and not every joke just has one. Some have multiple. Some have ones where you're like, well, that's kind of this and this. This is compare and contrast and this. Yeah, it can be both. Just like you'll have literary scholars arguing over whether something really fulfills the obligation of meeting complete irony. Same thing. If you don't have to, it's art. So, and also you have to remember, as Picasso said, you got to know the rules before you can break the rules.
Boom.
It's an art.
Yes.
So don't get all wrapped up and it's got to be this way,
Yes.
But a lot of times you can tweak and go, oh, if I do make it this way, that joke snaps, right?
And that's what part of comedians trying to just get away with attitude. They're not learning the rules first before they break them.
Right,
They
right.
just see like, Bill Burr's just up there talking. I was like, no, he's worked over half his life at this art form,
And he says, the first 5 to 7 years of my career, I did 1 and 2 liners because I had to know how to write a
Interesting.
joke.
Yeah. And that's what I did too.
When you know how to write a joke, when you're on the move, when you're in the flow, it's easier to see the opportunities or recognize the opportunities and the mechanics and the structure to be able to spin something and go, oh, I just put 2 ideas together. I'm going to now list real quick and put it up. Here's the line. When he does he was like, everybody wants to bang a hot chick. But the guy working at Home Depot can't because he's not a celebrity. Besides, chicks don't dig lumber. Right? That's what he says. That's his joke. And it's like, all he did was take something from Home Depot.
Yep.
Every time I see the name, if somebody says Home Depot, I see a pallet of 2x4s. And he says lumber, and boom, that triggers that image, and it makes us laugh. What a coincidence.
What were the 13?
13, if we go into 13, we have double entendre,
Okay.
we have incongruity, we have paired phrases, we have simple truth, we have recognition observation. So observation takes the recognition laughter trigger, and you just basically observe the world and basically explain what it is, like
Okay.
somebody waiting for a bus. They stand on a curb that's 7 inches high, waiting for a bus that's 16 feet tall. And they sit there looking for the bus. They don't see the bus, so they step off the curb, losing 7 inches. Then they raise up 2 inches, losing a total of 5 inches to see a bus that's 16 feet tall. If you can't see it from up there, you're not going to see it from down there. And all you're doing is taking an observation and stepping it out for the audience. So that's comedians should have a goal of every week, write down 5 new observations in the minutia of what's happening in life. And so it's just, you set yourself goals, so you're always walking around with comedic glasses. Then you have paired phrases, comedic irony, paradox, ambivalence. You don't have my list in front of me, and I just got lost.
Oh, you're fine.
But it's like there's 13 that you can use. Simple truth, very simple. It's like double entendre, but it's a phrase that has an intended meaning. You find it a lot in songs. We speak in metaphors and euphemisms. And all you're doing as a comedian, it's all in having your cynicism, proving it wrong. I'm going to show you that's wrong. So somebody says, like a song, you go to Disneyland, you hear It's a Small World. Have you listened to the lyrics? It's a world of joy, it's a world of tears, it's a world of hope, it's a world of fears. Isn't this a song about being bipolar? And the audience goes, oh my God, I never thought about it that way. It's so true. Because you're taking that simple truth and you're flipping it. Scripture has a lot of symbolism. If you take that and now go to the literary simple truth meaning, you can get a joke. Its essence and its foundation goes back to call me a cab. You're a cab. right? So call me a doctor. Is there a doctor? Call me a doctor. You're a doctor. It's that same raw form, but now expanded out to other things that we see all the time. So that's you'll notice that Jon Stewart. People say you want to take your comedy to the next level, start to recognize comedic irony, and also paradox. That makes your brain actually do a dance. Paradox is two things that could be true, but not true at the exact same time. For example, when Carlin used to say, on TV, you could say you pricked your finger, but you can't say you fingered your prick. It's prick and prick. Two different meanings of prick. They can be true for each of their meanings, but they can't be true at the exact same time. And oh my God, you use them so close together. They're the same word, but so different. So the brain does a little, oh, wow, that's interesting, So that's paradox. So there's so many different ways. Ambivalence. You can build an ambivalent situation and make sure you have two descriptors in the sentence. This is where specifics are important. And comedians sometimes try to be too economical and they remove a potential for a joke. So for example, if I say my dad was just diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Not a lot of opportunity there. Well, fuck my dad. I can add that attitude and maybe hope for a laugh, right? But what if I added more of a descriptor? My dad, who lives in Bakersfield, my dad who lives in East St. Louis, just got diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Horrible, right? He lives in East St. Louis. Yeah. So we're supposed to be traumatized over the colon cancer, but oh my God, he lives in East St. Louis. Esther, my son in Jersey just came out of the closet. Oh, that's weird. You have a son who lives in Jersey, right? So it's like using ambivalence quotient. Supposed to be upset about this, but instead I'm upset about that.
Gotcha.
So that extra descriptor helps you get there. That's another technique you can use.
Yeah, and is there other resources like this on your website as well?
Yes, lots of them.
Okay, cool.
And on the YouTube channel. You want to hear something really cool?
Yeah.
Masters series. You're familiar with the Masters series.
The Masterclass.
Yes, they're great, right? Ron Howard does one. Steve Martin does comedy. Blew me away. Steve Martin was my favorite guy when I was in high school. So was Jerry Seinfeld, right? So, and of course, I disagree with Seinfeld when he tells people you can't teach people how to do comedy. But he was my favorite. He's still one of my favorites. But I disagree with you, Jerry. I'm writing an article. It's going to be called "The Big Lie Jerry Seinfeld Wants Everybody to Believe."
I mean, there's techniques people can use, just like I think learning an instrument, but not everyone's Jimi Hendrix.
Right,
But
exactly.
people can learn the basics of it, but to what degree does come down to some natural ability.
If they practice and practice and practice and practice, this has been proven now. There's a book called Peak, written by Kay Anders Erickson and Robert Poole. And they're psychologists, and they've been studying for the last 30 years the psychology of mastery. And what they did was they studied like violinists, what separated the best from the best of the best. The best of the best practiced more and had more expert feedback. So that's what real practice is practice with expert feedback. So when you take, say, Jerry Seinfeld wrote 5 hours a day, always was at the clubs. Bill Burr is always at the clubs doing his thing. He's always there. He's always working at least 1, 2, 3 shows a night, right? So Emma Willman went in 2 years. I met her, I coached her a little bit, and she got on Stephen Colbert last year.
She's been on here.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
And she was also coached by Gabe Abelson, who wrote for Letterman. She was looking to get better and better. And she got on Colbert. But when I met her, she sent me a video of her. I go, "You're so good. Why are you coming to me?" And she said, "I want to tweak it so I can get on a late show." And I said, "I can help you with that." And then she said, I said, "How did you get so good? How long have you been doing it?" She said, 2 years. Wow, how did you get so good? 14 mics a week.
Yep.
Plus being open to notes, being open and seeking out expert feedback.
Yes.
So that's the key. So Kay Anders Erickson says anybody can master anything they want. He firmly believes that because the brain is highly adaptable. And so it's like, wow. Now, I've taken people who are absolutely unfunny, and now their friends call them funny. So it's very interesting. This guy, Brano Galuja, Croatian, right? He goes, my father used to say, don't laugh, it makes you look stupid. So I was never funny. So now I have nephews, and they're funny, and I want to be able to keep up with them. Can you help me? He showed up in my class regularly. He was an adult school teacher, right? And it's like, and he started doing mics around town eventually, and people saying, you're a really good writer, you're really funny. Then he was on campus at his school, and he was with other teachers, and he saw a poster on a kiosk. He goes, no, that's really funny. And they go, what's so funny about that? It said, Domestic Violence Workshop, Wednesday, February 14th. Mm-hmm. That's hysterical. Why is that funny? Give your wife a Valentine's gift. Don't punch her in the face. Mm-hmm. You know, he goes, that's incongruity, right? And so I was like, see, now he gets it.
It's hilarious.
You know, he can drive down the street and go, oh, look, authentic Chinese cuisine, se habla español. You know, he now sees, he's identifying this because now he's open to it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
now he's not Jerry Seinfeld, but he's certainly a whole different person than he was. He's now got a sense of humor that he didn't have before because he didn't recognize what triggered laughter and how to apply it.
But you got to do the work.
Whew, man, without a doubt. And he did 3 years. He came to every class.
Okay.
3 years. Plus English was a second language, so we had another barrier.
Yeah.
You know? But he said, I'm going to learn this. And he just kept applying himself, asking questions to the homework, all that stuff. So the masterclass, Steve Martin was interviewed one time, and I followed Steve forever. And he was interviewed one time, are you going to get back to stand-up? And I said, good, that's the question I've been asking. And he said, no, it's too hard. Then when I found out he was teaching this masterclass on comedy, I go, well, what's he going to teach if it's too hard? Mm-hmm. So I got the masterclass. I'm watching him basically talk about, did you watch it? Mm-mm. You know, so I'm watching him talk about being, you know, just his life and comedy and everything. And he goes, and you want to learn how to write, go to this website and look at the 13 comedy structures. And it's my fucking website.
No.
I was blown away. Students started to call me. Hey, my God, Steve Martin's masterclass says has your website on it. They're using you, go to your comedy structures.
What?
Blew my mind.
You didn't even know?
How humbling is that?
You didn't even know?
No, nobody
you just started getting pinged.
Just started getting pinged, yeah.
Dude.
That was really kind of a humbling experience, man.
That almost brought
also
tears to my eyes.
It was an honor to be
like,
Steve Martin, my idol when I was a kid.
Steve's like my favorite too. I almost teared up at that moment.
It was like
I don't know
so
why.
like
That's crazy.
I teared up when I heard about it. Like, oh my God, my favorite comedian in the world. You know, I was like, that's so awesome. I wanted to tell everybody.
It's incredible.
But, yeah. So that was really cool.
Dude. So
and all of it was just focusing on trying to give people the best tools.
Yes.
That's it. If you stay focused on the intent, whatever rewards come to you, I mean, that reward, I can't put a dollar amount on that. Mm-hmm. Like my idol comedically just referred them to me when it comes to writing a joke. Oh my God, right? How amazing is that? And so but every time somebody says anything to me, the compliments I get on YouTube, somebody put on there, you're the GOAT, you know? And I had to look up what GOAT meant.
Right.
Why are you calling me a GOAT? I didn't know what that was. And so, and anytime somebody gives me any kind of compliment like that, that just reminds me I have to work harder. Mm-hmm. Because now I got a bar to uphold, right? It's it's like, thank you, that's nice, but that just means I have to work harder and keep working and keep helping and, run into somebody experience a problem. How can I help them solve it? And that just helps me get better too.
Yeah, I think intent's super important because with me not taking the comedy school route, the red flag was my intention is to literally just like make money. I was like, I'm literally only doing this because it's been my primary source of income for the past few years. So as soon as I let go of that, those almost constraints of like, I gotta make this work because I gotta make money, because my parents were teachers and I do enjoy helping people, but releasing the class helped me to realize, but this podcast is helping people. Mm-hmm. And when I'm at shows and people ask me questions, I'm still helping people. Right. But the intent is to now do this to help as opposed to, I got to do this class, but then I got to do this workshop too to supplement. As soon as I realized my intent was not in the right place, then that's when the career just started to open.
I mean, you always have to keep the lights on, It's
of course.
But it's if the money is your objective, if fame is your objective, that's so fleeting. you know?
Yes.
And
it's not sustainable either.
It's not sustainable.
You wouldn't be as successful as you are if you were just like, oh, let me just hoard all the comedy secrets and make
Yeah,
people.
why?
It's not,
it doesn't do anything. It's going to
game.
help everybody. I mean, people get better. There's more funny people out there now,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Because I don't know if you know this, but most people don't, that when you laugh, your brain releases the same exact feel-good chemistry we release when we fall in love.
Whoa.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Right? It's also the same chemistry if you shoot heroin.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true. It's the same exact hormones are released when you laugh. So manually or spontaneously. So you can chemically change your mood if you're in a bad mood just by making yourself laugh for 1 to 2 minutes. I mean, chemically. I mean, that's like taking a drug. And it's better than a drug. So because it's more sustainable.
Well, what I found I've just started to put a more personal spin on my comedy in terms of, like, I've been working hard at understanding.
Yeah, you become an asshole, evidently.
Structure.
Right?
Yeah, well, yeah, they'll hear the seminar, the podcast seminar I did here at World Series where I got heckled and called an asshole and all this.
I don't know where that came from.
Sarcasm.
I really don't,
I'm
man.
so glad you were there.
Probably
because
you called him Dad.
I called him Dad sarcastically, but
Why? I mean, I was a comedy club guy. You should know.
It's incredible. And yeah. So, but what I found is when I've become more personal, people have started to come up to me, like telling me specific jokes, as opposed to like, oh, you were funny, and they can't remember anything. As soon as I started to make it personal and have an emotional connection, they were able to come up and be like, oh, that's just like my wife, or my dog, she treats our dog like that, or my grandpa said the same thing to me. And you mentioned in the Greg Dean story that you helped that comedian inject emotion into it, because for a lot of years my comedy was more surface, and it works because the math adds up. But I feel like the next layer.
I think Greg Dean was trying to help him inject that emotion
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
but he was
yeah,
running
yeah.
into a block. So I kind of distracted him and showed him he couldn't label it. So I said, what about one of these words here? And that snapped his brain out of this sort of intensity. And he was like, well, oh, these two right here. Okay, let's see if you can make that happen.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to steer you into is, so we're saying comedians need to learn the structure first, but then how do they start to inject that personal touch, that emotional touch?
I'm so glad you brought that up. The best piece of advice I got comedically as a stand-up was from an acting coach. And I studied in Lee Strasberg Theater Institute in LA, and some of the intense, acting schools. My dad was an actor studio guy, and so I was studying with a teacher named Lelia Goldoni. She was unbelievable because she never let me get away with my bullshit tricks, because those were my defense mechanism, trying to hide the fact that I feel vulnerable and put up this defense mechanism like I'm, my humor, I'm in control. And teaching me that I am perfect in all my flaws. So show your flaws. No problem with that, because people now connect to you. She goes, secondly, when I did 5 minutes for her in front of the class, the jokes mechanically were sound. I know they were good jokes. They laughed. I got laughs. I was like, ha, showed her. She sat there with her arms folded, her legs crossed, and she said, oh, look, Jerry thinks his jokes are so funny he doesn't need to perform them. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, I don't know how you feel about any of that, so I don't care. Ooh. Humans connect through emotion, Jerry. Go back home. I want you to write down how you feel about and play the emotion. Make sure it's authentic through each of these lines. Connect it to the environment. Connect it to the pictures. In fact, don't even think of the emotion. Think about the colors and the textures and the sounds and the smells of the events you're talking about. Automatically, the emotions will come to you.
Whoa.
And so I practiced what she said by at the same time rolling my eyes. I'll show her, right? And I go back and I said, my dad always said, anytime an acting teacher gives you a note, don't ever take offense to it. They're not saying it because they dislike you. They're saying it because they want to help you. And that gave me a whole different perspective. So somebody gives me a note, I never say, ooh, fuck you. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Always follow up with a question or two. It'll help you to clarify what they mean. So I came back and delivered it the way she said. And holy shit, what a difference. Applause breaks on jokes that I just thought were funny.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden people, oh my God, and what you said exactly happened to me. well, my brother does the same thing, or my father, it's like the same thing. And I was like, now you're affecting people. You're not just making them laugh.
Yes.
They're leaving with an impact.
How did you inject that emotion? You said you think about the smells and senses?
Well,
or
that's one of the
process?
lessons in acting. Instead of just trying to play sad, that's so general, sad. What do you mean sad? Distraught, upset? But if you remember the smells, textures, and the scene about where that emotion is connecting to, that's when the emotion comes out.
Okay.
So you're not just playing the label of an emotion, you're playing an experience. So it changes the way you play that experience. It's like when I coach actors sometimes on self-tapes, and a lot of times they deliver the lines looking at the character all the time. Watch real actors. They'll look at the character maybe 20% of the time, especially if they're talking about an event. The event, we go somewhere in our eyes to the event in our memory, and then we check in with them once in a while. So if you're really remembering an event or substituting a real event in your life for that character, that emotion's gonna come to you. And as comedians, we get good at this because we do it every night, expressing ourselves over a certain subject or emotion or something. If we can play sarcasm, we can play retaliation. Benign retaliation is another structure, very important structure. Probably a great structure to open with.
Okay.
Because I call it the perfect joke form, because it's got an antagonist and a protagonist built in. So you can say that, like when people say, hey, you're a comedian, tell me a joke, I always tell them a joke. Because if I just say, I don't do jokes, I do stories, what are the odds of them coming to any of my shows? Zero. But if I give them a joke, that was funny, where are you playing? Here, there's an app on my phone, I open it up, it's a form, they put in their email, they hit send with their first name, they hit send, it goes, they automatically get an email response that leads them to a 2 or 3 minute video, here's a clip, enjoy.
What's
then I'll
the app?
send them something else. I use MailChimp.
MailChimp. Oh,
And I create a link, and I have it on my Evernote, and I just hit that, and it opens up the website with that form on it, and they put it in, and I say, I'll invite you to a show, and it's my fan list thing. This happens all the time. Oh, you're a comedian? Well, tell me a joke, and I'll tell them a joke. The joke is usually my ex who cheated on me, called me on Halloween. She's like, Jerry, I don't know what to pretend to be for Halloween. I said, why don't you just dress normally and pretend you're in a committed relationship? And they go, oh, that's funny, where are you playing?
Right.
And it's that simple, and it's rather than, I don't do jokes, I do stories. The reason most of us say that is because we're not prepared to say a joke. Why not? How many people have come to see me based on that? Probably hundreds, based on meeting people and them asking to be on that list, by saying, hey, tell me a joke. So I just rambled.
No, you didn't. No, that was all relevant. So was there anything else with injecting emotion? You go to the place or you bring in a parallel experience to find the emotion within the story.
Don't chase the emotion. Sort of let it come to you. Okay. Really just say, oh my God. Let me tell you about this. My ex, she's like, she's A++, That's the positive way I tell my kids, she's fucking nuts is what she is. But all I'm doing is I'm picturing those situations. Gotcha. How does she make me feel? Sometimes she gets me so fucking frustrated. And I'm just not afraid to share that with the audience. That does take practice. And that comes with learning to be yourself the way you are with your friends at a bar on that stage. Because I want to put on my best self on this stage rather than I want to be completely vulnerable and be the same guy I am at the bar on the stage. And that's why I tell the audience, I am so flawed, I got baggage, I got Samsonite, but I'm not afraid because that's made me who I am. And being able to be that way and be honest with them on the stage, now you're communicating with them, Like we're watching the World Series of Comedy, a lot of comics, good jokes, but I don't feel the connection. I don't feel them connecting with the audience at all, They want to get up there and recite their jokes because they have a time limit.
Yeah.
And it's like, be with us. It doesn't matter the amount of laugh points you get. If you're with us, there's nothing on there that says how many jokes did you do per minute on the judging application or the form. It's like originality, stage presence, overall performance. Those are the 3 criteria. But yeah, laughs per minute do matter, but are you really still connecting with us and communicating with us?
But I've been doing this 9.5 years And I'm just now starting to kind of open up that level of comedy. I'm just now like peeling back that layer of like, oh, the personal and what's finding the emotional connection behind it. So it's like, I've been on stage a lot and I'm just now getting around to, oh yeah, emotion's important and I should tell my story and tell jokes that only I could say. And I try to put my jokes through a filter now of like, what can I do that someone couldn't steal, really? You know, that's I'm trying to put my material through that filter, but I mean, it's 9.5 years.
Well, I've given up on that.
You've been stolen a lot.
Lots of times. And so it's like, Jay Leno gave me a great piece of advice. He goes,
after he stole your joke.
Yeah, exactly, right? Oh, they also got sued lots of times for a lot of jokes being stolen.
Wow.
Because the head writer was not a great joke writer, great ad-lib guy, but he was not a great joke writer.
Well, other late night shows have gone, like Twitter, they've been accused of stealing tweets and stuff as well.
They did that with Conan. And what gets me is Conan at first stuck to his guns. He said, nope, I'm going to fight this. And then they finally settled with this guy. And if the judge only knew how you write jokes, she would have seen how easy it was for them to come up with this parallel thought on a current event. And I wrote one of the jokes he was yelling about the night it happened. It was like when the Seahawks they threw that pass play on that third down or fourth down play with 2 seconds left on the clock or whatever it was. They threw a pass play when they had the best running back in the league, and it was like right on the goal line, and they got intercepted. Because of course Belichick knows that Pete Carroll is going to think he's going to run, so he set his defense for pass, snapped that ball away, and they won. Now I said, "Wow, the MVP award goes to Pete Carroll," right there at the just in my house, and that was one of the jokes this guy argued. That was his original joke, you know, and I didn't even tweet it because I thought it was so low-hanging fruit. Because it's just right there. And so Conan did a version of it, and this guy did a version of it. And it's like, but if you list, it's right there. You know, so if the judge knew how jokes were written, the judge would have said, no, there can be parallel thought. So, but there's a lot of people that complain about that. I wrote some jokes, you know, when Trump said, oh, I'd go in there even if I wasn't armed, about the Parkland shooting. I said, yeah, because you could hurt a bitch with a bone spur. That night, Stephen Colbert did 2 bone spur jokes, and I tweeted that. I don't think he took it from me.
Right.
It's right there, you know, so I let him go. Like Leno said, just write more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And writing is a muscle, and it requires a lot of reps. And I feel like just for people listening, like the techniques and tools we're talking about require time and repetition, and writing is a muscle, and the more you do it, the stronger it gets, but it's going to be incremental. And part of developing the comedy muscle, and we can land the plane with this question, because this is something I ask every guest, is like an epic bombing story, like getting booed on stage, or getting a beer bottle thrown at you, if that's the one that comes to mind for you. But like in your over 25-year career, like, do you have a show that just sticks out as just that gig you'll never forget?
Let me see. I think that one was, I don't really see that beer bottle as a bomb. It was going well up till then.
Oh, okay.
And I did get punched in the face, too, after that, too. But I don't want to tell the story, because these days with this political correctness, people will see it as racist. Because it was in a town, there was a table of cholos, and they were having a good time, but there was a misinterpretation playfulness between the guys sort of ribbing each other, as guys do, and then some of their ladies thought it was too personal, and they got personal with me and called my mother a cunt. And so I had said a response based on factual information.
Yes.
And the way I said it was inappropriate, and they had no place to go. So that's when the beer bottle was thrown, and I deserved it.
Whoa, that was loud.
Somebody just said,
Someone's breaking in.
I want to make as much noise as I can.
Yeah, and that full story is on another podcast. I don't remember which one, but I came across that story in researching you. So if someone wants to hear it, they can hear it in its entirety on if you just search Jerry Corley on the podcasts. everything all right? Yeah, we're in the breakfast area of a hotel right now.
It's interesting.
Hey. Oh, the hot bro. So do you have a different show that comes to mind?
One of the times when I used to, I heard from Seinfeld too that he liked to open for bands more than he liked to work with comedians. So. And I just heard that, and so I go, so I had friends, and I played trombone in a horn band myself, so I knew some musicians. I had friends that had this fusion band, jazz fusion band, that was doing a lot of spots around LA, so they would always call me and ask me if I wanted to come and do a spot, and I would do like their breaks. And so one time I did a break for them at this place called the Rusty Pelican in Calabasas. And so I do a break for them, and it wasn't going well. Mm-hmm. And I could tell, I heard these three guys were standing off to the side. I hear one guy say, "Oh, look, he's bombing. Let's fuck with him." So they sort of walked towards the front of the stage, and one person would yell something, and as he ran out of breath, the other person took over. And it just was not, there was no way that I was going to overcome this. Mm-hmm. And this is what happened. I said, well, it looks like you guys are creating your own show, so which probably explains why you're single. I'm going to leave. Good night. Got some laughs from a couple of people over here who are now rooting for the poor failing comic on the stage. Right. Got off stage, went to the bar and said, fuck it, I'm going to get drunk. And so the bartender delivered a beer, and as I'm delivering the beer, I take my tape recorder and I set it on the bar, and it's still rolling, and I go, holy shit, this is the black box of an airplane. It has all the data that led up to that crash. I said, I'm going to take this home and take every line these motherfuckers said and write a comeback to it.
Wow.
And I turned it off, and I said that to the recorder. And I went home, and I wrote a comeback to every single line those guys said.
Wow.
And then I said, that's never going to happen to me again. And so that's what I did. So it was like, that was empowering to realize that, wait a second, I've got the data right here. I can write a line, a comeback to everything they said.
What went wrong, do you think?
I had a couple of new jokes that failed. Mm-hmm. And so they saw that as a weakness. And this audience is not a comedy audience. This audience is like they're you can talk while the music is playing. And all of a sudden I'm more of an imposition to them this time. So most of the time it worked out well, and it really got a chance to work those chops. But this time they just didn't want to hear from me. And these guys noticed it and decided to take advantage of it because they want to feel better about themselves. So that's what happened.
That's one of my favorite lines. Oh, look, he's bombing. Let's fuck with
him. I'll never forget that.
So beautiful. Just that epitomizes just a comedian on stage failing and just the sharks in the audience. That's so funny.
Oh, it's so funny. But the other thing we have to understand, too, is the audience psychology, right? Bobby Slayton, in a documentary called, Alone Up There.
Interesting. Okay.
It's done by a Canadian filmmaker, and I'm in it. He interviewed me, and I watched the thing. Bobby Slayton's there. Bobby Slayton says, it's an us against them mentality. And I'm like, that's so far from the truth. Because we've sat in those seats, and we've watched comedian after comedian get up on the stage. What is our disposition in general? It's curiosity. Who's next? What do they got? Mm-hmm. So it's never an us against them mentality. Just knowing that stepping on the stage changes your entire psychology of what this audience is looking for. They want to laugh. They're curious.
Yeah.
So why would you say it's an us against them thing? Maybe that's part of his persona because he was the bulldog of comedy. Yeah. So you got to stay that bulldog guy. But it's got to be a different age for him now, this PC environment.
Oh, my gosh.
I hear Seinfeld getting upset about it. All these guys going to... Well, write new jokes, adjust. Mm-hmm. You can't tell society what to do. You can sort of press against it a little bit, make your complaint, but they're gonna have that. They're gonna default to what they. That's a generational thing now you're dealing with. It's not something you can change overnight. You can mess around with them a little bit, but it's like doing Trump jokes. The moment you do a Trump joke, you're gonna tension that room up. Mm-hmm. So it's like. Somebody's going to want to fight you eventually. So that's what happens.
Throw beer bottles.
I had a guy want to fight me at the Comedy Store doing a Trump joke.
Really?
I did 3, and he said he wanted to fight me. So he got up, approached the stage.
Oh, that must have been more recently.
Yeah, that was recently.
Oh, so you're still out in the, you're still
Yeah,
out.
man, I love getting out. I'll go to the
grinding on
Comedy
it.
Store, like I'll go to the Improv, I'll do the
cool.
Ice House, I do corporates, I still, whatever I can, I go out and do something, you know?
Okay, good.
Because it's like, I love it. I still got to connect with people, right?
Got to sharpen the sword, too.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You know, there are times I'm like, I got to be doing more. I got to do, and I'm doing it at least twice a week, but it's like, you know, doing like Comedy Store or the Improv, but to be able to go out for a week is different, you know, to be able to do a cruise. But then, you know, I can't be gone because I still have now I have an 8-year-old at home, and my wife is an airline pilot. Mm-hmm. So she's gone, I'm home, you know, so it's, we got to work that out.
Yeah, but that is the mindset of a comedian. Is you see, I mean, even like Joe Rogan, multi-millionaire, still on stage multiple times a week. You know, Seinfeld's
Exactly.
still on tour. Like as a comedian, I mean, the stage is really, that's the laboratory. We can write all day. You got to take it to the stage.
Yeah, the audience is always the final judge.
Yes.
Even though you think you have 98% odds the joke is going to work, there's still that 2%. You may lay something out in flatline.
Yep.
And then you'll ask them, why didn't you laugh at that? And they usually tell you, you know?
And I've had comedians on here say their success rate is like 1 out of 20, but I feel, and the comedians listening, go to your website, go to Jerry's website, and look at like, well, if Steve Martin says do it,
Right.
you might as well go do it. We'll link it in the show notes to this episode as well, just so you can jump to it. But it's going to help you, like, the success of your jokes. It's going to help you write more jokes better and faster, I would imagine.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, begin to, the key is, I think, understanding why it works. Once you understand why it works, you're like, oh shit, yeah, okay, I got it, you know? And you'll write, John Voorhouse, author of The Comic Toolbox, said the rule of 9. When you write 10 jokes, 9 are going to suck. Get over it. But I think once you understand, I've seen in my classes, every night we do current events jokes. 7 out of 10 work.
Whoa. Okay.
Are really effective jokes. And I try to be very objective about it and go, okay, is that a good joke, or I'm just a big fan of them overcoming an obstacle? And so that's a solid joke. And then also the class will laugh, right? So 7 out of 10. They usually get that nail it. Some nights 6 out of 10, but it's rarely 1 out of 10. They're usually on point more than they are not. So, but then they've got to still maintain that discipline and regimented practice.
Yes.
So every day, man.
Every day.
Every day, just like a musician.
So you kids know, out there watching and listening, you have your marching orders. Do the work, all right? Do the work. You're going to want to listen to this one multiple times because there was a lot. This may be the longest one we've ever done.
We had fun, though.
Yeah, it was exciting because, I mean, I've been a fan of you, and it's cool to see people sharing all this comedy information, but with the right intent, you know?
Right.
So before we get out of here, is there anything else you want the world to know, or any closing advice you have for comedians?
I think you said it. It's all in doing the work. If you really love this and want to have a level of success, you got to make that commitment to do the work every day. Every day, you're going to. Gene Parrott said, I write every single day except for the weekends because I made my wife that promise. But he set a schedule. And I guess that's the important thing is in your date book, in your schedule, on your phone, set a schedule. I show up for work at this time. And if you don't do that, you won't. Because I find that, I'm going to wait till I'm inspired. That could be weeks to get that right signal of inspiration rather than just sitting down creating inspiration. You know, as I do it, you can sit down, my wife is like a smartphone. My wife is like a bank. And then list bank, you're going to find something in there release or that relates to that. Now, my wife is like a bank. Oh, she always wanted me to make 24-hour deposits. So it's like that. She's like an ATM at a bank. Now you just tweak it. And it's like just finding a second element and practicing with it. And you'll find something in there that fits. Most of the comedians won't do the work.
Yes.
They won't. Like 2%, this is the last thing I'll share, Sunshine's Law. It's a philosophy professor gave to my dad, and he passed to me. 2% of the population excels at their specialty. 18% are average or just above and complacent staying there. The rest of the 80% are on a declining scale of incompetence. Do you want to be acceptable or do you want to be exceptional?
Jerry Corley, everyone. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For
Thanks
being
for having
on
me
Hot
on,
Breath.
man.
The timing of this was so perfect as well. So please let the listeners know how they can keep up with you, support you. Like my listeners, not my listeners, the Hot Breathiverse is what we call this. Like they reach out to guests. They'll be reaching out with questions. I just had Craig Shoemaker was on here.
He's great. I
A
love
comic
Craig.
in San Francisco who loves the show reached out to him, ended up driving to LA to meet with Craig. Like the Hot Breathiverse is very engaged, and these are people who love comedy. And
You've
love
really done
learning.
such a great job at creating a community too. I mean, just listening to your seminar, I got to tune in because you had breatharians or breathiverse, and like brethrens, and I was just like, that's awesome. Such a good tool to use to create the community. In fact, I went back to the room and I toyed with the idea of what to apply to my sort of community, my tribe.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking as an angle, how can I help you all become joke doctors?
Yeah.
So just based on
Yeah.
what you had said, and I saw that was so, man, that moved me. I said, well, I want to be a part of this community, because it was so neat. That's why church is so effective, because I'm not a religious person, but I love the idea of the community, people getting together. So kudos to you for that endeavor.
Thank you.
And yeah, man, I'm very active on Twitter. I hate Facebook because it takes too much of my time.
Okay.
Although I'm starting a group now based on what you said.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I do have a Facebook group
Wow.
that's called Corley's Kids. That's only for people that have been in my classes. But I want to open something up some more to people that are on like YouTube. And I think Facebook's the better vehicle for a group, certainly, than Twitter.
Yeah.
But people contact me on Twitter at Joke Doctor. And I try to respond to everybody. People ask me for advice, some help. Sometimes I'll fix a joke. If I have the time, I'll help somebody. But I'm always active there because it's quick. You're in, you're out. You can do it on the fly.
Right.
Facebook, I always get distracted with other stuff. And now, next thing you know, it's 90 minutes of my time out the window. But definitely going to do that group. But
Great.
Twitter is a great way to reach out to me.
Okay. Yeah, and your website is
As standupcomedyclinic.com.
Okay, cool. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jerry Corley, I feel like our communities have a lot of parallels and overlapping.
Without a doubt. Yeah,
So I'm
without a
hoping
doubt.
this is not the first of many times we can.
Oh,
connect.
this is going to be synergistic. I could
Yeah.
tell when you were up there. I go, oh, we're going to have a good relationship. This because he's got a good philosophy.
Yeah.
That helping people, and it's like this will be fun.
Yeah, I was a little nervous with you, I was excited you stayed because I just watched yours a few hours earlier, and I was like, oh man, he does this professionally. I was a little nervous that you were sitting there and like I didn't know if you were listening or just like, well, let's just see what this kid's all about.
No, I was
But I'm
watching,
glad it applied.
going, well, he's an asshole. No, it was like I still don't know why he said that, man. What was neat about him saying that? No, you're being an asshole. I'm serious. You're being an asshole. And because I've never seen a room full of comics be bewildered at the same time. What? Was he doing this?
Seriously.
He's just being a comic,
And some comics were like trying to speak up, and I was trying to be like, "It's okay, hey, it's okay. I'm up here. I can control this." But I'll put the link to that episode in the show notes because I was recording the whole thing. And you can listen to it and hear it for yourself.
Yep, great.
All right, Jerry Corley, thanks for being on Hot Breath, my man.
My pleasure.
Woo! Oh my God.
A lot of fun.
Oh man,
That was a marathon.
that was fire. Hey, Hot Brethren and Sistren. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you love comedy as much as we do here at Hot Breath, click the subscribe button to join the Hot Breathiverse, and then watch more videos to get even more comedy tips. And stop sucking at comedy. Go ahead, click it. Hot Breath.